So let me start this video with a number. The cost of idle capital for most small boutique lending firms, those managing between $5 million to $50 million, the cost of idle capital for them typically ranges between $20,000 to $100,000 plus dollars per month in unrealized yield. Okay? And it's not because borrower demand is low. That's what people think, but it's false. Borrower demand nowadays, it's higher than it's ever been. The issue is that borrower acquisition systems in most boutique lending firms, these systems are slow, they're broker dependent, or they're just built on hope and referrals. And the fact of the matter is that in the modern day and age, when you're competing with companies that have already begun to integrate such advanced technological processes, you can't compete if you're operating in the Stone Age still. Okay? Now, here's what we've seen directly. Over the last 90 days, we have sent tens of thousands of emails to active US real estate investors and also construction firms and other firms as well. And we've tested multiple markets, multiple angles, multiple loan types, DSCR, fix and flips. We've tested it all. And the segment that has responded the most in terms of both clicks and actual booked calls and in terms of also positive responses, it was experienced fix and flip borrowers, but only when the messaging was tight, when it was clear, and when the offer didn't smell like the typical lender ad. Because the fact of the matter is that these borrowers, these experienced borrowers, ones that you actually want to lend your funds out to, they have options. Okay, they have so many options. And so if your cold emails or if your outreach or if your branding in general seems like every other hard money lender out there, it's just not going to cut it. Okay. So here's the interesting thing. Like lenders, we tend to think in terms of logic. Like we're a very logical bunch. Does the LTV make sense? Is the exit plan realistic? What's the ARV? Flippers, especially the ones who are in a bit of a state of chaos and they're handling 3 to 10 plus deals per year, they don't think in terms of spreadsheets. Some of them do, the more experienced ones, but most of them, they're just operating in this sense of semi-grounded chaos. They operate in rhythm, okay? So they have holding costs, they have staging timelines, they have investor pressure. And their first priority above all else is to make sure that you are actually real, that you are dependable, and that you are fast. Okay? And this isn't just me and my team saying this. This is what the data shows. If you look all over Bigger Pockets, if you look all over Reddit, if you look all over any online lending platform, the complaints are the same every single time. And the fact is that if your process feels like they're moving through quicksand, and if your communication rhythm isn't fast and crisp and tight and direct, or if you're not consistently in their field of view when they need capital, well then you're going to be losing out on so many deals. Okay? And so many lenders, they oftentimes think that, oh, this borrower, they were too finicky. They were too up in the air. But oftentimes, if we are willing to be a bit more humble and to assess our own processes a bit more critically, we can see that it's not the borrower. Oftentimes, it was our own experience not giving them the assurance that they needed. Okay? So, like I was just touching on, ghosting, it's simply a symptom of your timing giving them too much risk. Okay? Because every flipper knows that delay equals death. If they only have between 6 to 14 days to lock in a deal, well, if they're waiting 6 days for you to respond, or even 3 days for you to respond, they're gone. They're going on to the next person. And so, sure, this isn't as important once you've built a pipeline of consistent repeat borrowers. But if you're trying to work with somebody for the first time If you are taking hours and hours to respond to their first initial outreach message to you, or you're not picking up the phone when they call your team, or you're taking days and days to respond to their initial request, it doesn't work. Okay? So it's not that these people are ghosting you because they're disloyal, because they're finicky, or because they're too in the air. They're oftentimes ghosting us because we are too vague. They cannot afford to wait 6 days for a response. They can't wait 2 weeks for a doc list. Okay? Every day that they wait, the proper on that property, it's just costing them money. Okay? So in that meantime, while they're waiting for you to respond, if another lender reaches out and they have clear LTV guidelines and they have a fast closing promise and they have proof of past speed and they don't have all of the rigid underwriting requirements that you may have, well, they're going to move on very quickly. Okay? And this is the invisible churn that most lenders never really see. And it's because it never even gets logged in your CRM. Or if you're a smaller lender, you may not have a CRM. It never gets logged in your processes. And so my point here isn't to say that you should put yourself in a suboptimal position by lowering your requirements. No, not at all. But you do have to set up your system in such a way that it brings them the speed that they need in order to execute on the deal most effectively. Okay? Now, beyond that, you have to realize that your system, it's a signal. Okay? And what do I mean? Well, everything that the borrower sees, it signals something to them. And so, for example, if you're sending out cold outreach and you're not doing it in an aligned way, if you're doing it in a way that looks like everybody else and it just feels like spam, well, that signals to them that you are desperate. Okay? And nobody wants to work with somebody who's desperate. Or if there's a 7-day delay between you reaching out, between touch points, between you responding to their outreach, that signals that you're disorganized or that you're too busy for them. Or if there's no clarity on your next steps of your process, well, that signals risk for them, because if you don't have clarity, then they can't trust that you're going to be able to fulfill on what you're saying when it's time to actually close on a deal. Okay? And on the other hand, if you have a very clean bullet point email that lays out your deal criteria and your turn time, if that's your initial cold outreach, okay, they're going to love that. By the same line of thought, if you send a short human video walkthrough that shows your entire process, again, that shows clarity. It shows expertise. If you have a very simple, clear intake form, that makes the process smoother, quicker. And again, speed is everything. And all of these things together, they signal strength, they signal competence, they signal velocity. And when you can signal velocity to them, well, that is going to make them more likely to work with you, and that's going to ensure that you have high capital velocity. Okay? Even before they talk to you. Now, beyond that, like I mentioned earlier, flippers, especially the ones who have experience in the game, and they've done, between 5 to 10 plus flips, they have options. And so you have to realize that oftentimes if an experienced flipper is coming to you for a first time deal, well, it may be because their typical lender is, for whatever reason, unable to help them in the situation. It could be because they're all out of capital for this particular quarter. It could be because the deal doesn't fit that specific lender's requirements. But the fact of the matter is that if they're an experienced lender, they already have someone who can help them. But for this specific deal, they might not be the perfect fit, so they're coming to you. So with that being the case, you have to capitalize on that. And the way to do that is with complete clarity and complete speed. They're not only looking for the cheapest lender. They're looking for the ones who can give them a clear expectation on what will happen next. And they're looking for someone who is reliable. If you are slow, that signals a lack of reliability. If your process is not dialed in and simple and easy to understand, that signals a lack of reliability. And so, like we've listened back on calls with our clients, with other private lenders, where the borrower said things like, "I chose you because you actually explain what the draw process looks like," or the other guy just felt sketchy. He felt too much like a right under the radar type of guy. So when you have this clarity, it leads to such a higher conversion rate, and that allows you to maximize your capital velocity. Okay. And again, like, yes, the rates certainly matter. The amount of points that you charge, it certainly matters. But trust is what converts. Now, when lenders don't have a when lenders don't have a cold borrower pipeline, they oftentimes just exist in a state of reactivity. They're waiting on broker calls, they're chasing repeat borrowers, hoping that they come back, or worse, they're just dropping rates to try to stay competitive and putting themselves into dangerous situations. And so, what this all leads to is your capital sitting dormant in between deals. And the next thing you know, 40% of your capital is uninvested. It's it's dangerous because capital that's not working is capital that's just decaying. And so, for our typical partners, their fund sizes range from between 5 million to 25 million on average. And in many cases, before coming to us, they only were working around 70% deployment. Okay. And so that leaves multiple millions of dollars just sitting idle, sitting dormant. And that leads to your investors bringing you complaints or moving on to other funds that are more reliable, that are more consistent, that have higher velocity. Okay. And when this is spread out over the course of 52 weeks, that could be multiple six figures, and in some cases, even seven figures in lost opportunity. And so you don't solve that with only better terms. It comes back down to your systems. It comes back down to how you're systematically reaching out to borrowers and systematically following up with them and showing trust. It comes down to these layers and not just your rates. So those are some of the main things that we've noticed after helping several different private lending firms to implement systems to bring in more qualified borrower appointments. And again, we've sent out tens of thousands of code emails. And at this point, our average response rate, campaign to campaign, is 2.1%. Of that, our average positive response rate is about 30% of those responses that we've gotten. And out of the positive responses, about 20% convert into calls. Okay, after being qualified to actually be worthy of a call. So what that balances out to, if we're sending out 50,000 emails, let's say 50,000 emails that we're sending out to potential flippers and to construction firms or to BRRR method buying. When we're sending out these emails to all these people, that typically leads to 36 conversations in total if we're sending out 50,000 emails, for example. And of those 36 conversations, the lenders are typically able to book at least 20 to 30% of those into becoming actual borrowers. So that leads to 3 to 6 new deals for them a month, which, if their average deal size is, let's say, $250,000, it's between $750,000 to $1.5 million in new funded volume every single month. Okay. But it doesn't just start with their rates. It doesn't just start with going to these networking events. It doesn't. No, you have to build the systems first and foremost. And when the systems are dialed in, that tends to cause this massive wave that causes everything else to rise with it. Okay. So again, the fix, if your capital isn't fully deployed right now, or if you're relying only on brokers or inbound traffic or repeat borrowers, if that's what you're relying on, it might be time to tighten the system. Okay? So if you feel like you could have a bit of growth in this area, um, our team, we offer a no pressure call where I'll sit down and walk you through our borrower acquisition process. We'll talk about your current gaps. And I'll just tell you plainly whether that I think that implementing certain systems could drive a stronger ROI for you. Okay, so there's no pitch at all. We'll just take an honest, objective assessment into what you're currently doing in order to attract qualified borrower appointments, and more importantly, what you're missing out on. Okay, and if it seems like we can help you, then we'll tell you about what that looks like, and if not, we'll let you know. But regardless, you walk away with some type of value. Okay, so if you would like that, the link is below if you want to set that up. Um, Again, no pressure, but we've helped many firms at this point, and we'd love to help some more. Anyways, hopefully you found some value in this video, and I will see you on the next one. Cheers.